I had to unlearn a lot of bad habits that I brought from my ministry background about money.
Mm.
One of the big things that I had subconsciously ascribed to was what I call the poverty gospel.
Mm.
And it's this idea that the harder your life is in the name of your faith, the holier you are. And really, I think it's a justification for people who are underpaid in the ministry context to make sense of their situation and to cope with that and say, I'm doing a better thing here. And in reality, it's not really about how much or how little you make that dictates the quality of your relationship with God. And so I had to come out of that, and I felt very guilty for making money. And that was tough. But it exposed some of these belief systems that I had that had to be corrected and unlearned. Money is not a bad thing. Money is a tool. Money makes you more of who you already are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started to grapple. But then I went to the other end of the extreme and I was like, now I'm in an occupation that has no income ceiling. So now I can produce as much. And then I got exposed to the hustle culture and some of the darkness that doesn't get talked about in the hustle culture. Burnout. It's never enough. Your mind's preoccupied. And so I've been on this spectrum over the last 5 years of learning how to settle into a good spot of, and really when you boil it down, my motto is I want to stay humble and I want to stay hungry.
Are you a hardworking dad, juggling family responsibilities while dreaming of building wealth through real estate? Welcome to the Invested Fathers Podcast, where we explore how to balance investing and fatherhood. I'm your host, Kenny Johnson, founder of East West Capital. Over the past 5 years, I've been buying real estate to free up my time and secure my family's future. Now I'm here to help you do the same. Join me as we navigate the real estate world together, building wealth and strengthening our families. As my grandma always said, East West, home's best.
I'm a transplant in Northwest Ohio, originally grew up Middle Ohio, and I met my wife where I live now in Lima, Ohio, which is on I-75 south of
I know Lima.
Dayton. Do you know Lima? Okay, very cool.
I have some buddies in Lima.
The fact that you know anybody in Lima is impressive. Temple Christian is the school that's here. Okay. And there's some other stuff, but yeah, I came into Lima and I originally did youth ministry. I was doing a youth ministry program. So did youth ministry for 8 years. And I always tell people youth ministry is one of those jobs where the more immature you are, the better you are at your job. So it worked out really well.
I agree.
Worked out so well.
You fit right in.
I was really good at youth ministry. I learned a lot about people, I learned a lot about communication, learned a lot about myself. Mm-hmm. And this is more of a generic principle for anybody who's listening. The only way you learn is by doing. Any skill, anything, you got to get reps in. And there's a lot of things I'm not good at. My one saving grace is that I'm not afraid to try things. That has yielded so many dividends in my life, and it even carries into the parenting side of things too. And so just to fast forward, long story, I did some pastoral work and some inner city ministry, had a really great time, formed a lot of awesome relationships, met my wife in that program. We got married in 2014. And then I went to real estate 5 years ago. They had all this context and this background from the vocational ministry side of things. And very quickly, I got my real estate license and said, I also want to start investing in real estate. So that set me on a trajectory to rub shoulders with you and raise masters. And there's a lot that happened in there. Family's been a huge part of that.
Yeah. I'll give you just quick bio. 5 years ago was also real estate entered for me. I worked at camps over summers. I've always enjoyed youth ministry stuff. Worked at a camp in Hawaii for 2 summers, small camp, and did a soccer youth mission trip for 2 summers. I did Brazil, Hawaii. I just always enjoyed working with kids. After college, I joined the teen house at our church, which was great. I was just out of college and I feel I was still cool enough to I played sports.
Relatable.
I could connect with them. Now I'm probably just like a loser. I'm too far gone. But that was awesome. And then I married my wife about 11 years ago. We ended up wanting to do a new church together. So I stepped out of that role and went more toward new church, somewhat stopped doing youth stuff. But I love the youth. I feel like it's so fun. And one of our guys recently said what you said about the more silly and immature you are.
Oh, yeah.
The cooler you are with them and the more successful you'll be as a youth pastor.
So what's funny now is the angle that I play with teenagers is I'm the cheesy dad. And I was like the hip kind of trendy college kid. And now
you've gone over the hill.
My humor. I lean into the dad thing.
Yeah. I'm a third grade teacher once a month. It's hard to build relationships a little bit on the once a month basis. My son is in third grade, so I'm just going up with him. But I did something that I'm sure you've seen. The kids are all watching. There's probably like 20 kids. We ended up doing this rock, paper, scissors challenge, but I made it seem like I had never lost before and that like, anyone could beat me. They are really good because I'm really good. This little girl who's like just the quietest little wallflower girl beats me. And I fall to my knees. And I'm like, no, I can't believe it. And everyone was laughing. And I'm just like, oh, okay, this is what I need to do. This is how I connect to them. So,
man, it keeps you young. It really does.
Yeah. And I was working 60-ish hours a week, 3 hours commute. Landscaping was my friend from college started his own company. And I just was tired of that lack of freedom, lack of time.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I would do if I didn't do this though. So there was a little bit of a, who are you? What is your strengths in life? Sort of moment of scaredness, fear, doubt, confusion, and ended up going to a real estate conference with a buddy, Rich Dad, Poor Dad class. It was very on the whim. I felt like even just going was going to be like a 4-hour time window that I didn't even have to give. And I'm so glad I did because it started thinking, like you had said about taking action, that you can't tell somebody, or if you even tell them about real estate and they read about it or they're listening to this and they're like, oh, okay, I'm learning more real estate. It still is nothing until you do something about it. Big believer in no risk, no reward. And I was ready for some type of risk and ready to get some uncomfortability in my finances for the sake of having some more time freedom. So
you were ready because you were desperate to find an alternative. You mentioned pain point. Like there has to be pain in your life that would cause you to change what's comfortable.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And we could go through our whole lives. There's I don't even know if I've read it recently, but Outwitting the Devil, Napoleon Hill, more or less like you just coast, like you're just coasting forever and like until you die. And you just coasted your whole life until like you did nothing that was, you were comfortable. It wasn't like there was any issues, but you just never actually moved. Drifting. I think he calls it drifting actually. Anyway.
So I love the phrase passive aggressive, right? And there's two sins that I feel like men can identify with in that, passive and aggressive, right? So passive is the omitting side of things. It's what we don't do. It's the tendency to want to stick our head in the sand and not change or address those areas that we know are just wreaking havoc in our relationships or our business. And it's easier to leave them unattended. And then passive aggressive, right? We get that. We come too hard. We use our strength and subvert over somebody. And that passivity, man, like it's there inside of all of us just to want to keep status quo.
Awesome. All right. Garrett, for those that don't know, and I only know this, I believe because we were on a call sometime before this, you have 5 kids. True or false? Okay, I was wrong. You have 6 kids. Dude, congrats, man. That in itself qualifies you for like general of so many awards.
Qualifies me for joint pain and exhaustion.
Also, yeah, all of that. Give us just a quick snapshot. How's dad life going for you right now?
Dude, I always want to be very careful how I talk about being a dad because it's easy to joke around about, hey, kids are a lot of work, da-da-da-da-da. At the end of the day, that is not a true reflection of how I feel. There is nothing more worthwhile that I would give myself to than being a dad. And I sincerely believe that despite the jest and the joke, it's hard. And I would choose this hard every day. We have 6 kids now. We had 6 kids in 8 years. So it has been a busy decade.
Yes,
lots of babies, lots of change, a lot of having to reinvent stuff like anybody else who's a dad. I always say the biggest jump is from 0 to 1. But we're in a season now where my youngest is 6 months old. My oldest is going to turn 9 in November. And we just now in the last probably year or two have felt all of the work of creating a culture that we want our family to have is now being reproduced and passed on through our older kids. And so it's like operating outside of us to an extent. And that has felt like a huge win.
No, that's awesome. I always think it's fun to start these conversations with For those, I don't know, busy listening on the go, whatever it is, give me just out of the gates a big takeaway. If people just stopped listening after this thing that you could say, what could you just drop in regards to a word of encouragement, word of advice, word of motivation, being a dad?
This is maybe going to ruffle feathers a little bit, but so many times when we approach the topic of parenting, and I'm going to use a faith analogy here because there's an inconsistency that we don't realize we have. In your faith, there's so many areas of your life or times where you're like, Lord, whatever you want. And you trust yourself to the sovereignty of God, right? And you're like, I'm trying to let go of a situation. I'm trying to trust you. But then when it comes to the topic of parenting, the first question is, how many kids do you want? And so there's areas of our lives where we recognize that we defer to God's direction and leading. But then there are certain areas where we have very specific ideas about what we want. And we're not really open to any kind of change or deviation in that. So one of the first things that God did in our lives was to let go of our expectation about how we were going to have kids. And this is the big takeaway. Nobody gets to the end of their life and says, I wish I would have had fewer children. Now, I will say this. I sat around a dining room table with my wife's uncle, and he's an emotionally reserved guy. And in a moment of clarity at the dinner table, unprompted, he just says, he's looking at our family. He says, you know what? I wish we would have had more kids. And that resonated with me because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm on the right path. And I'm not advocating for like, hey, you need to be Amish, you need to have 20 kids or even 6. I always say, make it a kingdom decision. But we don't really lay that down at the Lord's feet and say, what would you have here? What do you want this to look like? And we just limit ourselves on what we think we can handle. Did I think I was going to be able to handle 6 kids? Never in a million years. Now that I'm here, I've had to grow. My capacities have to enlarge. So I would just tell people, like, don't wait for the perfect time or think that your finances have to be at a certain point. It'll never come. I'm a case study of that.
Yeah. No, awesome. This conversation, I always try to start in a, what was it like growing up in your household type of answer or question, just for sake of giving us some clarity, because obviously just being here, we were a recipient of some type of father figure or not, like maybe lack of a father, and that has influenced us. And then from there, what are we doing today? I want to talk about what are some ways that we can help the world in regards to fatherhood. Like, what's a problem that you and I feel like we could talk about for a little bit? And then just really tips and tricks of fathering. Having 6 kids, you're going to be speaking to many dads out there who have a lot of kids like that. We have 2. So that's the direction of the show. Let's start with that dad question. Give me just, what was it like growing up in your household? Did you guys have 6 kids? And it was just like, oh, that's what we should do.
I have one older sister who's 4.5 years older than me. We were like a nuclear family. 1 boy, 1 girl, mom, dad, stayed together, married for a long time. My dad was a pastor before I was born, but oddly enough, when I was born, he had moved into social work. And so he wasn't actively a pastor anymore, but was involved in lay level at the church. Single-handedly, one of the most influential men in my life. He passed away 4 years ago from cancer. And that was very tough, obviously, for a lot of reasons. But I can honestly say one of the comforts that I had was that he had instilled so much into me in the early parts of my life that I felt like he had already shaped and molded me so much. I didn't feel like I was losing out. I really grieved from like his grandkids, my children that weren't going to be able to experience the same Poppy that I had grown up as a dad. And one of the things that he did the best that is so uncommon in men today is he was so high on like the emotional connection and emotional intelligence. Like he would hug me, he would kiss me. It was not uncommon to have those kind of interactions. And so that really was like normative and okay for me in a male to male context. Like I was okay for my dad to come give me a hug and kiss me on the cheek and to say, I love you. Like those. And then when I went to youth ministry, I saw the void of that. It contrasted what my experience was growing up.
That's awesome. I almost feel like that's very common to hear that. What you just described, the youth, the disconnect between father, son emotionally, I think is a very, if I'm talking like with my dad and his dad, it was like nothing. It was like, so now my dad and his mom, my grandma, I think there was extreme connection there. And my grandma actually died when she was 60, somewhat unexpectedly. And I actually never met her. So just seeing the dad and then like his dad, there's this trickle down effect that I think has happened. I love asking that because it shows a little bit of what are some things you're carrying on and maybe some things that you're changing. And it sounds like you had the perfect example of that good connection emotionally that you can now take with your kids. And obviously as a youth pastor, not necessarily hug and kiss all the kids there, at least have this connection of like your feelings that I think is very important with the male and not just with mom.
Yeah.
Anything
Yeah. And you can't give what you don't have. I'm not ignorant to the fact that, I'm a good dad and I'm trying to do the thing. So many men have invested into my life and shaped me and molded me. I want to honor and recognize that and not just sit here and be like, I'm the byproduct of my own making. I've really had a lot of people instill into me. I've seen the benefit of that firsthand. And I want to be that. That influence cannot be overstated.
Agreed. I think what's really interesting about your story, Garrett, faith background, very strong relationship with your dad, real estate. I feel like that kind of came out of left field there. Tell me a little bit about how that entered and speak a little bit to my audience of busy professionals. If someone's out there and they've got e-commerce website business or they're a salesman that's just always traveling, I'm not telling everyone, hey, you should quit your job and do real estate. Not my message. In fact, I think it's my message to not do that because of the amount of work it requires. But for someone like yourself, what was that transition like?
So yeah, long story short, my wife and I left to try and plant a house church. And I say try, we've been doing that for the last 5 years. And obviously you can't draw off salary from that. So I had to go find work, which was part of the model is just being in the marketplace. And so I knew a broker who I had a previous relationship with. I respected the way that he ran his business, got my agent license, and he was very heavily involved in real estate investing. So many real estate agents never invest in a piece of real estate, which is wild to me. You help people do it for a living and you're 3 feet from gold yourself. So I started investing and getting a lot of reps in and just being very hands-on with that process. I had to unlearn a lot of bad habits that I brought from my ministry background about money. One of the big things that I had subconsciously ascribed to was what I call the poverty gospel. And it's this idea that the harder your life is in the name of your faith, the holier you are. And really, I think it's a justification for people who are underpaid in the ministry context to make sense of their situation and to cope with that and say, I'm doing a better thing here. And in reality, it's not really about how much or how little you make that dictates the quality of your relationship with God. And so I had to come out of that, and I felt very guilty for making money. And that was tough. But it exposed some of these belief systems that I had that had to be corrected and unlearned. Money is not a bad thing. Money is a tool. Money makes you more of who you already are. And so I just started to grapple. But then I went to the other end of the extreme and I was like, now I'm in an occupation that has no income ceiling. So now I can produce as much. And then I got exposed to the hustle culture and some of the darkness that doesn't get talked about in the hustle culture. Burnout. It's never enough. Your mind's preoccupied. And so I've been on this spectrum over the last 5 years of learning how to settle into a good spot of, and really when you boil it down, my motto is I want to stay humble and I want to stay hungry. And so from an actual execution perspective, we started buying small multifamily, single family houses where a lot of people start in real estate. I'm on a real estate team. We started doing some investing together. So we bought a 26 unit portfolio. We got a little bit bigger and did a mobile home park. And so we started to scale the size of the properties that we were doing. It's a lot of work. So one of the things, when we started our podcast, the Reinvest Podcast is what we do on a weekly basis that just focuses on real estate investing. And as we started doing the podcast, I say we, my co-host Seth, real estate investing is often oversold. It's very clickbaity, a lot of stuff on YouTube. Hey, you can make, quick cash or this much in passive income. And it's like, you know what it takes to get $5,000 in passive income through actively managing real estate yourself. Like to achieve that is going to take you a long time and it's going to be very difficult, but it's oversold. And so I I don't want to trick people into thinking that it's easy. And now there are other avenues that you can do and pursue. And what I realized is, you said to your sales professionals and some of the people that are busy, like, you got to figure out what your goals are. Some people, their goal is not to leave what they're doing. And so to that end, it's, hey, invest in the benefits of real estate without having to leave what you enjoy or what your main income driver is, or understand that if you're going to phase out of that, it's going to take you time to replace that income if you're going to actively buy real estate yourself. And it's not sexy. It just takes time. I love all of these different syndication companies. You look on their website and they're like, we average out like a 35% or a 40% IRR, and we give like a 3x equity multiple. And all of those metrics came from 2018 to 2022. And what people look at, they don't understand, is there were so many market tailwinds that were driving returns that you could have been a bad or an average investor and made a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Those returns are not happening to the same scale today. And so they have recalibrated their mindset to now buying in the down market and market cycles and how that affects profit. So that was my journey into real estate investing. I'm bought and sold on it. It is a long-term gain, man. It's like, you got to do it for the long haul. So
yeah, I think that's good. And I'm always encouraged and somewhat shocked when I meet people who are very successful at their trade, whatever that is, doctor, salesman, but they don't know anything about real estate. Like, real estate is like their gap. And it's like, whoa, okay, let me help just give you some starting points. Now, of course, there's people out there who are very successful and know all about real estate, but give me your maybe a 2-minute, hey, you're someone that maybe wants to be a passive investor. Tell me about your business and how do you bring someone into your fold?
So Level 5 Capital is our investment company. And really what we do is we help Christian business owners buy back their time, build generational wealth, and save money on taxes. Mm-hmm. And we buy predominantly in the Midwest. I always tell people, you need to spend time rapport or understanding the person that you're investing with. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of headlines out there. You don't really get to see someone's character when things are going well, mm-hmm. when there's an abundance. It's not until the proverbial tide goes out, you see who is swimming without their trunks on. There is a very relational aspect to investing and partnering with somebody. We don't just use the fact that we're Christians as a blanket thing, because there's a whole misuse of that as well. There's plenty of well-meaning people out there that have no idea what they're doing. There are a lot of ingredients that go into partnering with somebody and putting capital into a deal and having confidence that it's going to do well. We usually would just book a call with an investor and get to know them and hear what their goals are. We don't presume that we're going to be a good fit for them. And we're interviewing them as they're interviewing us to see if there's that alignment. At the end of the day, I don't want everybody investing in a deal, because there might be somebody who is caught in the 2020 model where it's like, hey, if I can put 100 grand in here, in 18 months, you're going to double that. And that's just not a realistic expectation of what our company does. We buy and hold real estate for a long amount of time, and that generates cash flow, and that cash flow compounds. Investing isn't sexy. Warren Buffett, what he did is not sexy. Everybody looks at his highlight reel and they're like, I want to be Warren Buffett. He's 96 years old and he's been doing this for, everybody's jealous of what you have, but not how you got there. And so we start those conversations, see if there's that alignment of goals. And then we just try and keep open line of communication as we have deals for people to plug into. Some people, passive investing is not what they should do. Honestly, if you have control issues, you're probably not a great passive investor. You probably should be an active investor. So there's a level of trust that you have to have. But anyway.
No, that's good. I think one of the biggest takeaways from that answer for me was start developing relationships with people that are doing real estate as soon as possible. Obviously, like yourself, like myself, someone who's doing it, is this a good fit for you? They always say you do business with those that you know and trust. How long does it take for someone to know and trust you? It probably takes a year or so, depending on how much content you have out there or how eager that person is to move some money around. But at least in my experience, I've been told this, it's very true. But the time you meet somebody, it's about a 6 to 12 month time until they may give you some money. And that's with just consistent touch points and building trust.
I will say this is for anybody. People are always watching, even when you don't think they are. I've seen that in my life where somebody will approach me from out of the blue that used to be in my sphere. Maybe we parted ways and they came out of the blue and they said, hey, I've been watching what you've been doing. It seems like you're having some success. Tell me more, unsolicited. And I wasn't thinking about them. I forgot about them. We weren't really in contact anymore.
Right.
But do the right thing and you'll find success.
All right, let's go a little more just dad. And I know we're probably getting close on time. Yeah, let's go 2 questions on dad stuff. Because I'm always in my mind, I feel like this podcast could be 100% like, hey, we're going to help dads by talking business. And then the other side is, hey, we're going to help dads by talking like personal dad life stuff. And that's why I love this whole space. But if we could go a little more personal, I always enjoy this question. What's one of the best things about being a dad right now for you? Like a fun story or a fun pastime you're embarking on or starting?
All your kids have different personalities, okay? And I used to think there was one personality when I had 1 kid, and then I had 2 kids, and I realized there was 2 personalities. Now I have 6 kids, and I realize there's 6 personalities. So disclaimer. So Haven, who's tucked in the middle, she is feisty, hard charging, high pain tolerance, risk taking. I showed him this video on YouTube the other day. This is probably a month ago. And it's like probably viral 10 years ago, but nobody would know it now. And it's this guy in a wheelchair who's like on a street next to these fireworks. And the person taking the video is, back it up, Terry. Back it up, Terry. And he's caught in the middle of this crossfire of these fireworks. So I don't know how it started one day. It was like a Saturday. And I'm looking at Haven. And I just looked at her, I was like, back it up, Terry. And she thought it was a challenge and she reciprocated that. So now we have this thing and she's like, can we do a back it up, Terry battle? And it's where we go to the opposite ends of the house and we run full bore towards each other. And she just tackles me and pummels me for, 5 minutes. So that's been really fun just to see that part of her personality coming out.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. With 6 kids, and I love that you mentioned the 6 different personalities. I have 2, and they couldn't be more different. I don't know why I thought they would be similar in any way, because everyone told me it would be different. But I would think that just keeps you on your toes. You have to be fully ready to engage in a new person's. What worked for this person, Haven over here, is not going to work for this person over here. Any stories on that being true, whether through a failure or success?
Yeah. Through a failure. I very much took the disciplinarian role. And I thought anytime one of my kids wasn't doing something, it was a challenge to my authority. And I really confronted that. And my wife helped me understand that there's more going on there. So it's been a journey. I'm a recovering drill instructor. And my daughter, Elia, she's 3rd in line. She is the most tender-hearted little girl ever. She's girl all the way through, curly hair, butterflies, ballerina, rainbows, princesses. And I have 5 girls. So I mention the word or I elevate my voice towards her, instantaneous shutdown, tears. It just sends her in a tailspin. And I've done that so many times to her, not realizing that it's a totally different strategy. What happens is she begins to beat herself up with her words. She'll say, I'm so stupid. And then it's I just understand how I went from a 4 to a 5. In her mind, I went from a 2 to a 9. I have to be very careful how I talk with her.
That's awesome. Earlier, I had mentioned, what are some things we can help the world? And I'm a big believer in community neighborhoods. Obviously, you talked about a home church. So I feel like there's a power of neighbors and how we can be a light in our neighborhood. But if I could ask about what are some things that you see dads struggling with that if we could just get this thing not taken care of, everything would be fine. But anything that you see as a common problem that you're like, man, this is something I just really wish I could help the majority of dads out there work on. Not even for those that are listening, it could just be them helping their neighbors in this way as well. Any thoughts?
I was doing some jujitsu this morning with a buddy of mine, and he's a young father as well. And we were having a conversation about how your schedule just continues to get thinner and leaner the more is required and expected of you. And when we first started having kids, I really fought that. I tried to hold on to this and have my cake and eat it too. And there was like a letting go that I had to have of my schedule and letting go of hanging out with friends in the evening. And my father-in-law hit me with this. He's like such a wise little master Jedi. He said, when you say yes to one thing, you say no to something else. And maybe a lot of people have heard that before. But for my personality, I needed to hear that because I was thinking I can do everything. I'll say yes to this and this. And it doesn't work that way. So I think a lot of dads struggle letting go of certain things that they have as an expectation of this is a right of mine, right? This is a right to go work out at 8 o'clock at night and end my day that way. And everybody's schedule is different. So I'm not putting, hey, it's got to look this way. The principle is it's a dying to self process. And so, yeah, I don't get with friends as much as I used to, but I'm saying yes to some other things over here with my family. And therefore I'm saying no. You got to stop that wrestle in your heart or else you're going to be miserable and you're going to almost resent where you're at and be very discontented. So I think if you want contentment, it comes through acceptance of where you're at and what's required of you.
Yeah. I've heard it said every yes is 1,000 no's.
That's
I would
great.
apply that. My previous job was in customer service up at a lake community about an hour and a half away. And I'd get these phone calls sometimes saying, hey, we need you here. This is an issue. In my mind, I'm like, okay, I have to do this because this person is needing me. And I feel like this is what I have to do to be successful in my job. But I was leaving my wife totally screwed in whatever she had planned for the family or us. She needed help, young kids, whatever. I'm sure you obviously can resonate with always having someone young in your life for the last 9 years or more. That kind of hit home to me is by me saying yes to this customer, I'm saying no to my wife and my kid and other things.
Yeah.
And that is one of the hardest things to, I really feel, be able to tell someone like, hey, this is the right move at this moment in time. You have to be very careful there because sometimes the customer does need to be handled because something, but I'm a big believer in the family being taken care of first, however that can be. And a lot of that is even in preparing. So you're not in those situations very often.
I just to comment on that, I know we're short for time,
good.
but what you said really jogged something for me. Literally the growth in my life that has taken place has come from being a dad. So like constraints breed creativity. They breed innovation because I'm constrained. My time is constrained. So how do I accomplish what I want to get done? I need to be more efficient with my time. How am I being inefficient with my time? Man, I waste a lot of time on my phone. Hey, I sleep in till 7:30. Oh, in order to wake up earlier, I need to go to bed at a decent time, which doesn't always happen with kids. But as a rule, like it's just forced me to become a better person. And like those constraints have been a good thing and have resulted in my growth. So I don't resent them, but like you can be smarter about how you're doing things and feel the outcome of that.
Love it. Garrett, leave our audience with keeping up with you. I know you're pretty active on LinkedIn and you have your own podcast. If our audience wanted to follow you or find out how to get more information about you, how would you direct them?
So I always love talking about real estate. The dad stuff, obviously, I love talking about as well. Any of that stuff is relevant. LinkedIn is the easiest way to reach me. You can DM me or reach out that way. And then we have a weekly podcast about real estate investing called the Reinvest Podcast. And so that'd be a good way just for entry level. We don't purport to be like the podcast, but we are a podcast that I think is a good option.
Awesome. Garrett, thanks so much for your time, buddy. To your 6 kids and your wife, thank you for letting dad be on the podcast for an hour and good job, buddy.
Thank you so much, man. I love what you're doing with the podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Invested Fathers Podcast. If you liked this episode, we would love for you to click subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. We appreciate all of your hard work as a father and look forward to our next episode together.